Hey guys, welcome back. In the last video, we went over our sun settings. In this lesson, I want to go over shadow settings and the graphic display settings, because you can have this display in different ways, depending upon what exactly you want, whether you want realistic or hidden line. So it'll depend upon the quality that you want to achieve. Now, something that you probably notice is that our shadow settings are currently off. But if we click the Shadows On button at the bottom of the screen, we can toggle them on. Now, looking at the shadows, you might be wondering what controls how strong the shadows are, how dark they are. Well, we have different visual settings that we can set on our project that will influence the shadows. If you click on the little cube icon at the bottom of the screen, you'll have 6 options. Wireframe, which consists of almost every line that forms a 3D element. Hidden line, which is like wireframe but hides any lines that are not immediately in the field of view. Then there's shaded view. Consistent colors. Realistic, which not only takes into account the materials but also fleshes out the trees, giving you a more realistic depiction. And then there is ray trace. Now I'm going to tell you now, I don't normally use ray trace, because what it does is it creates an almost interactive rendering of your model. So it lets you work with your model in rendering mode, but that means it takes a very long time to do anything. You'll see if we try to orbit around our model, it'll get really fuzzy at first, but after a couple of seconds it'll re-render itself. So it's by far the most realistic, but it takes a lot of processing power. Most of the time when working on shadow settings, I'm either on shaded or hidden line. So for this case, I'm going to go to shaded, and you'll notice at the top of that little window, there's a button that says Graphic Display Options. This is great if you want to edit any of these settings and see other settings as well. So you can see we currently have our shaded style selected, but we can select the other display types from here as well. And you can choose to show the edges or not. This will take out a lot of the artificial lines and create smooth textures. So that's one option that you have. You can also select smooth lines with anti-aliasing. I actually use this one a lot because it defuzzes a lot of the lines and edges in the model. You can see it's a little choppy or jagged when you have it turned off. But when you turn it on, that edge becomes much smoother and straighter. So that's another option. You can also choose the transparency of your model. This gives your model a ghost-like quality and lets you look inside it. So I'll actually zoom in so we can get a better look. And you can see the dining room set, you can see the couches. So this is a pretty interesting effect if you ever need a translucent quality to your model. But for now we'll turn transparency off, so we can focus on the other options. Alright, you can also create silhouettes. What this does is it takes the outside perimeter of your model and creates whatever line types you want. So for example, if we choose demolished and press apply, you can see that this dashed line appears. If you want heavier lines, you can select wide lines. And this will create a thicker, darker line that appears around most of your objects. So if you want a silhouette and you want to change the appearance of the perimeter of your model, you have the ability to do that. Then there are also our shadow options. Cast shadows is basically turning your shadow settings on and off. And then there's ambient shadows, which create a softer feel with the shadowing on your model. Now for the next option, some of you might not have this. Sketchy Lines was only just released in Revit 2015. Revit 2014 and earlier do not have the Sketchy Lines option. So with Sketchy Line, you can add some jitteriness and extension to your lines. It gives your building more of a sketch feel. The lines aren't so hard. And remember, you can always adjust the jitter and extension to give it more or less of a sketch feel. And note that extension refers to extending the lines beyond the limits of the building, to really highlight the sketch style. But remember, this is totally optional, and you can turn it off at any time. Now under lighting, you have access to your sun settings, which if you click that button will open up the sun settings dialog box. And then you can also adjust the ambient light and the shadow quality. So if you want lighter, gentler shadows, you can turn that setting down. And if you want harder, darker shadows, you can turn it up. So these sliders are nice, and they're something you should play around with, because it lets you adjust the lighting quality on your project to whatever levels or degree of realism you need. And then there's also photographic exposure, which you can activate if you want. And lastly, you can choose to create a background for your model. Now usually with this, I like to choose a gradient, and this lets you choose a sky color, a horizon color, and a ground color. You can also choose an image, so if you've got an image on your computer of, say, a sky in the background, you can apply that. Now keep in mind with backgrounds, they do not become visible until you are looking either directly at the sky or looking at your model from a lower angle where the sky is visible. So if I apply one of my sky settings, you'll notice that it's not visible. That's because we're looking down and the sky is actually above us. So if I use the orbit wheel, remember keyboard shortcut Shift W, and adjust my view so that we're looking up, you can see the sky. Which, as I said, isn't bad just to get a feel for your project. So those are all your main graphic options. Remember, when we're talking about the background, that you can always set it as an image, you can choose a generic sky, or you can have no background. And remember with all these options, you can always save them as a view template, which can be extremely helpful if you have multiple views of the same project and you want to have the same feel carry through across all the different views. Alright, that's shadow settings and graphic display settings. I will see you in the next tutorial.